really expect me to go to Bethlehem? Joseph banged down his chisel on the scarred bench. Ephraim, his cousin, had just entered the workshop. You don't have a choice, Joseph. If you don't go, the Romans will confiscate your house and your precious tools. Just try to carve a yoke with your fingernails. What are we, cowards? The carpenter retorted. Mark my words, Ephraim, this enroll in your ancestral city business is nothing more than a way to squeeze more taxes out of us. If we give in to those foreign tyrants now, they'll just be back for more money. What's more, Joseph continued, you're crazy if you think I'd take Mary on a trip this month. She'd probably have the baby on the way. Couldn't you just leave her with your mother for a couple of weeks? She'd be all right. Nobody says the women have to go. It's the heads of the households who have to register. Register. Ha! Be taxed, you mean. So why not just leave her at home? Joseph brushed the wood chips aside and motioned for his cousin to sit down. The carpenter spoke in a low but earnest voice. Mary's aunt has made life miserable for her ever since she found out that Mary was pregnant. Some people were willing to let it go, but not Tabitha. She got my wife all stirred up about it too, Ephraim volunteered. Not just your wife. Most of the women in this town go out of their way to avoid her. At the village well, they whisper just loud enough for her to hear. Many's the day she's come running home in tears. People sure can be cruel, Ephraim said. At least you and Mary went ahead and got married. Joseph bit his lip, but didn't say more. Ephraim got up. Well, you're going to Bethlehem, aren't you? You'd be a fool to get the Romans on your back. You know what they did to old Ben. Joseph stood up slowly. Yes, I'll go, but Mary'll have to come along. There's no way I'd leave her in Nazareth by herself. However, when Joseph talked to Mary about it, she didn't seem nearly as sure as her husband. How could I walk all that way, she said. I waddle now. I just can't make it. Mary, well, bring old Jake. You can ride him when you get tired. Have you ever ridden on Jake? Well, no. That animal is the most bony, jolting mule in all of Nazareth. I'd rather walk. She did ride, though, some of the way. Joseph would finally stop for the day when Mary just couldn't take it anymore. He'd help her down off Jake, then he'd fix a fire while she would unload the heavy blankets and try to find some shelter under a tree or a large rock. Mary would always be the center of attention among the few women traveling that time of year. I remember when I was carrying Levi, one would start. Made my feet swell. I couldn't do anything for months. That's nothing, replied another. My sister got so big everyone thought she was carrying twins. But her time came and there was only one baby. Died, though. Joseph glanced over at Mary in the flickering firelight. He could see fear flit across her face. Her hands moved quickly to her swollen belly so she could feel the baby's reassuring kick. The women didn't notice. The first one went on, Oh, and the pain is so awful. I'm glad I'm too old to have any more babies. Joseph put his arm around Mary's shoulders and pulled her close. Only one more night on the road before Bethlehem. They reached the sleepy village of Joseph's ancestors just about dusk on the 5th day. Joseph went into the inn and nearby houses trying to find a place to sleep. God, he whispered as he calmed the town, can't you find us a decent place to have this baby? Nothing. All at once he saw Mary's face tighten. She tried to suppress a groan as she fought with the pain. It was a long moment before she relaxed, but he could see worry written all over her. Joseph went back to the innkeeper again. Are you sure there isn't any room? My wife's about to have a baby. We've got to find a place out of this wind tonight. The innkeeper thought a while. Did you try the house at the end of the street? They sometimes take people in. I tried an hour ago. Any relatives in town? Any second cousins? No. Mary was shivering now in obvious discomfort. Joseph, she said weakly, I've got to go lie down somewhere. Well, there's a stable in the back, offered the innkeeper at long last. Of course, it's full of animals from all the visitors in town for that blasted Roman census. But if you can find a place in the corner, I guess that'd be okay. He paused. Just don't keep the animals awake all night. Well, it was the other way around. The dozen donkeys were in the strange barn never stopped moving, and the smell was so overpowering to Mary, who had been fighting nausea as her pains got stronger. In the wee hours of the morning, Joseph knocked on the innkeeper's door again. "What do you want this time of night?" the innkeeper snarled when he finally came to the door. "Is there a midwife in town?" "Oh, it's you. A midwife?" "Yes. Old Martha lives in a little house about 3 blocks from here. You go down the main road, turn left at the 2-story house, and then go down to the alley. You can't miss it. You go down the alley and across the pasture, and then she lives in a shack just behind the 3rd house after that." I really don't think I should leave my wife. Her pains are coming awfully fast now. Could you go?" "Jonathan," the innkeeper yelled into his darkened house, "get up and fetch old Martha. A lady's having a baby in the barn. Hurry." He turned to Joseph as he closed the door. "Have some pity, man. My whole family's awake now." Pretty soon the door opened again, and a young lad ran off in the chilly air. After a while he returned, walking slowly, so that he wouldn't outdistance the old midwife, whose arthritis certainly didn't take to cold winter nights. The boy was shivering by the time he got to the stable. "Here's Martha, sir," he muttered quickly, and then he darted back into the warmth of his house. The old lady put them at ease right away. She had Joseph fetch water and cloths from the innkeeper. It must have been nearly 2 a.m. by the time the baby came, and then another hour before Joseph dug into his robe for a few coins to give the old woman as she hobbled away. Then he returned to his wife and took her hand as they looked into the puffy face of their son, alone at last. "I'm so tired, Joseph," Mary said, settling back into the blanket-covered straw. The baby finally stopped crying and drifted off to sleep. Joseph stirred a few minutes later as some men peered in from the darkness into the lamp-lit stable. He nudged Mary awake and reached for his staff. "What do you want?" Joseph said to the men in a forced whisper. "Don't wake the baby." "We're shepherds," one called out. The baby started crying. "We saw angels out on the hills an hour ago." The entire story stumbled out as the shepherds edged into the stable to see the baby. Joseph relaxed his grip on the staff. The shepherd continued, "And the angel told us, 'To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is the Messiah, the Lord.' The angel even told us about swaddling cloths and the manger here." "The angel told you about the manger too?" Joseph interrupted. "Oh, yes, that's exactly how we knew where to look." Joseph glanced over at Mary. Her eyes met his, and he squeezed her hand. "This baby is the Messiah, isn't he?" Joseph said quietly. "After all these hassles, I really started to question, but it's almost like God planned the whole thing. The trip neither one of us wanted to take." He chuckled. "He must have seen you on old Boney Jake." Joseph laughed out loud. "Even this smelly old barn and its manger." He stood up, still chuckling. "What do you know? In spite of all the problems, no, in the midst of all the problems, God has been working all along."